Commander Jake Martinez stood at the viewport of the UNS Liberty as the massive alien station came into view. Nexus Prime stretched across space like a glittering city of metal and light. Hundreds of alien ships moved around it like fireflies in the darkness. Jake had seen pictures, but nothing prepared him for the real thing. "First time seeing it never gets old," Lieutenant Claire Thompson said as she joined him at the window. Her voice carried a mix of wonder and nervousness. Today was humanity's official welcome into the Galactic Council. After 3 years of careful negotiations, humans were finally being accepted as the 13th member species. Jake nodded but kept his eyes on the station. Somewhere in those gleaming towers, representatives from 12 different alien civilizations waited to meet them. Each species had ruled space for thousands of years before humans even discovered fire. Now Earth was asking to join their exclusive club. "Are we ready for this?" Claire asked quietly. "Ready as we can be," Jake replied. He straightened his uniform and checked his watch. In 2 hours, they would dock with the station and begin humanity's new chapter among the stars. The weight of representing his entire species pressed down on his shoulders. Dr. Alan Foster walked up behind them carrying a thick folder of documents. As the mission's chief scientist, he would be presenting human technology to the Council's research committee. His gray hair was perfectly combed and his clothes were wrinkle-free, but Jake could see the worry in his eyes. "The welcoming ceremony starts in 3 hours, Alan said. "I've been reviewing the protocols again. We need to be very careful about what we say regarding our military capabilities." Jake frowned. The Council had strict rules about weapons technology. Each member species was required to follow specific guidelines about what kinds of weapons they could use. Energy weapons like plasma cannons and laser arrays were standard. Quantum disruptors were allowed for larger ships. But there were long lists of forbidden technologies. "What about our railguns?" Jake asked quietly. Alan glanced around nervously, even though they were alone. "We don't mention them directly. If asked about kinetic weapons, we just say we're still developing our magnetic acceleration systems. Let them think it's just magnetic levitation technology for cargo transport." The 3 humans looked out at the alien station again. Jake wondered what the other species would think of humanity's approach to warfare. While every alien civilization had moved to energy weapons thousands of years ago, humans still relied heavily on projectile systems. Their railguns could fire metal slugs at incredible speeds using electromagnetic fields. The results were devastating against any target, but the aliens didn't need to know that yet. The UNS Liberty docked at Nexus Prime exactly on schedule. Jake led his small delegation through corridors filled with beings from across the galaxy. The Zephyrians were tall and silver with 4 arms and eyes that glowed blue. The crystalline collective members looked like walking jewels that sparkled as they moved. The Void Singers had tentacles instead of legs and communicated through musical tones. Each species nodded politely as the humans passed, but Jake could feel their judgment. To them, humanity was a baby species that had barely learned to walk among the stars. Earth had only achieved faster-than-light travel 50 years ago. Most council members had been exploring space for millennia. The welcoming ceremony took place in a vast amphitheater at the station's center. Representatives from all 12 species sat in a circle around a raised platform. Jake, Claire, and Alan walked to the center as thousands of alien eyes watched their every move. Admiral Kethvar of the Zephyrian Empire spoke first. His voice was deep and mechanical, translated by the Universal Communication System. "We welcome the humans to our council. Your species has shown remarkable progress in developing space travel. We look forward to learning about your contributions to galactic civilization." The words were polite, but Jake heard the underlying message. The Zephyrians controlled the largest fleet in known space. They had kept peace through superior firepower for over 3,000 years. To them, humans were just another primitive species that needed guidance and protection. Jake stepped forward to respond. "Thank you, Admiral Kethvar. Humanity is honored to join this council. We bring with us a strong desire for peace and cooperation. We also bring unique perspectives and technologies that we hope will benefit all member species." "Indeed," Admiral Kethvar said with what might have been a smile. "We are most curious about these unique technologies. Perhaps your Dr. Foster could enlighten us during tomorrow's scientific exchange." Alan nodded respectfully. "I would be happy to present our research findings. We have made significant advances in several areas, including propulsion systems, defensive measures, and various forms of magnetic acceleration. A member of the crystalline collective chimed like distant bells. The translator rendered their words in flat tones. Magnetic acceleration is an interesting field. We abandoned such primitive approaches over 4,000 years ago when we developed gravitational manipulation technology. Still, we appreciate your efforts to catch up to modern standards. Jake felt his jaw tighten but kept his expression neutral. Claire placed a gentle hand on his arm as a reminder to stay diplomatic. The aliens weren't trying to be insulting. They genuinely believed that humanity's technology was thousands of years behind theirs. The ceremony continued with formal introductions from each species. The Void Singers performed a haunting melody that told the story of galactic peace. The thermal dancers created intricate patterns of light and heat in the air above the assembly. Each demonstration showcased technologies that seemed like magic to human eyes. When it was humanity's turn, Jake had Claire play a recording of Earth's greatest symphony orchestra. The music filled the amphitheater with sounds that no alien species had ever heard before. Jake watched their faces carefully and saw genuine interest for the first time. Music, at least, seemed to transcend species barriers. After the ceremony, smaller groups gathered for informal discussions. Jake found himself surrounded by military officers from various species. They peppered him with polite questions about human defensive capabilities and fleet sizes. Each question was carefully designed to measure humanity's military strength without seeming aggressive. "Your ships are quite small compared to our standards," noted a thermal dancer captain whose skin glowed with shifting patterns of red and orange. "How do you achieve sufficient firepower with such limited space for weapon systems?" Jake chose his words carefully. Human engineering philosophy focuses on efficiency and effectiveness rather than size. We believe that smaller, faster ships can be just as powerful as larger vessels when properly equipped. "Ah yes, your plasma weapons," Admiral Kethvar interrupted as he joined the group. "We reviewed your technical specifications during the application process. Standard energy output, conventional focusing systems, adequate for a developing species but nothing remarkable." "We appreciate your assessment," Jake replied evenly. He didn't mention that the specifications they had shared showed only their most basic weapons. The real capabilities of human military technology remained classified. Dr. Foster was having his own challenging conversations with the science committee. Jake could see him across the room, gesturing enthusiastically as he tried to explain concepts that the aliens clearly considered outdated. As the reception wound down, Jake felt both relief and frustration. The ceremony had gone well, and humanity was officially part of the Galactic Council. But he also understood that the other species saw humans as junior partners who needed protection rather than equals, who could contribute meaningfully. That night, as Jake reviewed the day's events in his quarters aboard the Liberty, he wondered how long humanity could maintain the facade of weakness. The galaxy operated under assumptions about warfare that had remained unchanged for thousands of years. Energy shields could stop plasma weapons and laser arrays. Quantum barriers could deflect particle beams and gravitational weapons. But none of these defenses had been designed to stop a solid metal projectile moving at a significant fraction of light speed. Jake closed his reports and prepared for sleep. Tomorrow would bring more diplomatic challenges and careful conversations about human technology. The aliens would continue to underestimate humanity based on their own ancient prejudices about primitive weapons. Eventually, Jake knew that underestimation would prove to be a fatal mistake. 6 months had passed since humanity joined the Galactic Council, and Commander Jake Martinez was learning that membership came with unexpected problems. The UNS Liberty orbited the Council station at Nexus Prime, while emergency meetings took place inside. Reports were flooding in from the Outer Rim territories about a new threat that had everyone worried. The Void Hunters had returned. Jake stood in the Council chamber, listening to Admiral Kethvar address the assembly. The Zephyrian's forearms moved in complex gestures as he spoke about border security and acceptable losses. Around the circular room, representatives from other species nodded in agreement or whispered among themselves. "These raids are a minor concern," Admiral Kethvar declared. "The Void Hunters strike quickly and then retreat into deep space. They avoid our main fleet positions and target only isolated settlements. This is hardly a threat to galactic security." Jake felt his hands clench into fists. Minor concern was not how he would describe the attacks that had killed thousands of innocent people over the past 3 months. The Void Hunters were a nomadic warrior culture that survived by raiding other civilizations. They had appeared suddenly from unexplored space with ships that were fast, deadly, and completely without mercy. Ambassador Katie Sullivan, humanity's diplomatic representative, rose from her seat. Her voice was calm, but Jake could hear the anger underneath. With respect, Admiral, these raids have resulted in significant casualties among civilian populations. Human colonies on the frontier have been primary targets. We cannot simply ignore this threat. The Crystalline Collective's representative chimed in with sounds like breaking glass. The translator converted their words into flat speech. The Outer Rim has always been dangerous. Species that choose to settle in those regions accept the associated risks. The Council cannot protect every remote outpost. Jake watched Katie's face grow red with frustration. The human colonies under attack weren't remote outposts. They were established settlements with families, schools, and thriving communities. New Montana alone had over 200,000 residents, including many children. Governor Lisa Parker of New Montana had sent desperate messages pleading for help. Her colony's defenses consisted of a few orbital platforms with standard plasma weapons. When Void Hunter raiders appeared in their system, the platforms had barely scratched their hull armor before being destroyed. Only the raiders' focus on stealing supplies rather than killing everyone had saved most of the population. We formally request permission to reinforce our defensive positions, Katie continued. Human colonies require additional protection until the Council can address this threat properly. Admiral Kethvar's glowing blue eyes focused on Katie with what looked like amusement. Of course, Ambassador Sullivan. The Council grants humans limited defensive rights within your territorial boundaries. However, all defensive measures must comply with established weapon restrictions. We cannot permit destabilizing technologies that might escalate conflicts. Jake wanted to stand up and shout that their current weapons weren't working. The energy shields on Void Hunter ships seemed designed specifically to counter plasma weapons and laser arrays. Human forces were fighting with one hand tied behind their backs while their people died. But he kept silent and listened as the Council continued their debate about acceptable response levels and diplomatic solutions. The Void Singers performed a mournful melody about the cycle of violence. The thermal dancers created light patterns that supposedly represented harmony and balance. None of it would stop the next raid. After the session ended, Jake found Katie in a side corridor looking exhausted and angry. Lieutenant Claire Thompson was with her, reviewing casualty reports on a handheld device. How bad is it? Jake asked quietly. Terra Nova was hit yesterday, Claire replied without looking up from the screen. Agricultural settlement, mostly farming families. The Void Hunters destroyed 3 transport ships trying to evacuate civilians. Current death toll is over 4,000. Jake felt sick. Terra Nova was one of humanity's oldest frontier colonies. He had visited there 2 years ago during a diplomatic tour. The colonists had been proud of their success in creating a thriving farming community on a previously barren world. What about our fleet response? Jake asked. Katie shook her head. Captain Ryan Bell took the UNS Defiant to investigate, but by the time he arrived, the raiders were gone. Standard protocol is to avoid pursuit into uncharted space. The Council considers it too dangerous. Too dangerous, Jake repeated bitterly, but not too dangerous for the Void Hunters to keep using it as a base for more attacks. The 3 humans stood in silence for a moment. Around them, alien representatives continued their conversations about trade agreements and research exchanges. The galaxy was continuing its normal business while human colonies burned. There has to be something we can do, Claire said finally. Jake looked around to make sure they weren't being overheard, then spoke very quietly. There is, but it would mean breaking Council restrictions on weapon technology. Katie's eyes sharpened. What are you suggesting? Our railguns, Jake said. The Void Hunter's energy shields won't stop kinetic projectiles. A single tungsten round from our magnetic acceleration systems could punch right through their hull armor. The Council would consider that a violation of the weapons treaty, Katie warned. They specifically forbid kinetic weapons above certain energy levels. Only because they think kinetic weapons are primitive and ineffective, Claire pointed out. They have no idea what our railguns can actually do, Jake nodded. During the past 6 months, Dr. Alan Foster had been carefully sharing human technology with the Council's research committee. Every presentation focused on applications that seemed primitive or outdated by galactic standards. The aliens remained convinced that humanity's magnetic acceleration systems were crude. Attempts to copy their own gravitational manipulation technology, none of them understood that humans had developed kinetic weapons to a level of sophistication that made energy weapons look like toys. "We need authorization from Earth," Katie said. "This decision is above our authority level." Jake agreed, but he also knew what the answer would be. President Nathan Clark had been getting increasingly frustrated with the Council's ineffective response to Void Hunter attacks. Admiral Betty Johnson, head of Human Space Command, had been pushing for permission to deploy advanced weapons since the raids began. The conversation was interrupted by an emergency alert from the station's communication system. All species representatives were summoned to an urgent council session. Jake and his team hurried back to the main chamber where they found the alien delegates in obvious distress. Admiral Kethvar stood at the center of the room holding a datapad with trembling hands. His usual calm demeanor was gone and his glowing eyes flickered with what looked like fear. "We have received a transmission from Warlord Skrax, leader of the Void Hunter fleet," he announced. The message was broadcast across multiple star systems to ensure maximum distribution. The main display screen activated and showed a massive alien figure covered in dark metal armor. Warlord Skrax's voice was deep and filled with contempt as he spoke directly to the camera. "Weak council species, your pathetic defenses amuse us. We take what we want from your soft colonies while your fleets hide behind energy barriers. But we grow bored with easy prey. Soon we will test ourselves against your greatest warriors to prove our superiority." The message continued with specific threats against major population centers and military installations. Skrax seemed particularly interested in testing his forces against human settlements, calling them the soft flesh species that hides behind alien weapons. When the transmission ended, the council chamber erupted in worried discussions. Several species demanded immediate military action, while others called for diplomatic negotiations. Admiral Kethvar tried to maintain order, but it was clear that the situation had moved beyond their normal procedures. Jake looked at Katie and saw his own thoughts reflected in her expression. The time for playing by council rules was rapidly coming to an end. Warlord Skrax had just declared war on the entire galaxy, and the current defensive measures were completely inadequate. Somewhere in deep space, Void Hunter fleets were preparing for their largest assault yet. When they struck, Jake knew that energy shields and plasma weapons would not be enough to stop them. Humanity had joined the Galactic Council seeking peace and cooperation. Instead, they had found a civilization that was completely unprepared for real warfare. The aliens had spent so many thousands of years following the same military doctrines that they had forgotten how to adapt when those doctrines failed, but humans remembered. And soon the galaxy would learn what that meant. The emergency alert reached Commander Jake Martinez at 3 a.m. ship time. He rolled out of his bunk aboard the UNS Liberty and activated his communication panel. The message was brief, but it made his blood run cold. Hope's End Station under attack. Massive Void Hunter assault in progress. Civilian casualties mounting. All available ships respond immediately. Jake was pulling on his uniform before the message finished playing. Hope's End was humanity's largest civilian station, home to over 50,000 families. It served as a cultural center and trading hub where humans and aliens could meet in a peaceful environment. The station had minimal defenses because it was supposed to be protected by Council patrol fleets. Lieutenant Claire Thompson burst into his quarters without knocking. Her face was pale and her hands were shaking. "Sir, we're getting live feeds from the station." "It's bad." "Really bad." Jake followed Claire to the bridge where the main screen showed chaos. Hope's End Station was a beautiful structure of interconnected rings and spires that had taken years to build. Now sections of it were on fire, and debris floated around the damaged areas like deadly snow. Security Chief Sam Rodriguez was trying to coordinate the defense with whatever weapons the station had available. His voice came through the communication system filled with desperation and static. "This is Hope's End Security. We have massive hull breaches in sections 7 through 12. Evacuation pods are launching, but the raiders are targeting them. We need immediate military support." Jake watched in horror as Void Hunter fighters swept around the station firing at escape pods filled with fleeing families. The small civilian craft had no armor and no weapons. They were completely helpless against the raiders' plasma cannons. "How long until we reach them?" Jake asked. 47 minutes at maximum speed, replied the navigation officer. Jake stared at the screen, knowing that 47 minutes might as well be 47 hours. By the time they arrived, Hope's End would be nothing but wreckage and bodies floating in space. The attack had clearly been planned to cause maximum psychological damage. Today was the station's annual Harmony Festival, where humans and aliens celebrated friendship between species. Thousands of alien visitors were trapped on the station along with the human residents. The Void Hunters were making a statement that nowhere was safe from their reach. "Sir, we're receiving a priority transmission from Earth," the communications officer announced. Jake accepted the call, and Admiral Betty Johnson's face appeared on a smaller screen. Her expression was grim and her voice carried barely controlled rage. "Commander Martinez, you are to proceed to Hope's End immediately. Rules of engagement are weapons-free. Do whatever is necessary to protect those civilians. Admiral, the Council restrictions on our weapon systems still apply," Jake said carefully. Admiral Johnson leaned forward and her eyes blazed with fury. "Commander, I am watching 50,000 innocent people die while we follow rules designed to keep us helpless. The Council has failed to protect our citizens. We will not fail them." The transmission ended, leaving Jake staring at a blank screen. The message was clear, even though it had been delivered in careful diplomatic language. Earth was authorizing the use of any weapons necessary to save Hope's End. That included the railguns that humanity had kept secret from the Galactic Council. Jake turned to Claire, who was monitoring the tactical displays. "What's our weapons status?" "Standard plasma arrays are online and charged," she reported. "The magnetic acceleration system is also ready for deployment." Magnetic acceleration system was the polite name they used for their railgun batteries. Each one could fire tungsten projectiles at 12% of light speed, with enough kinetic energy to destroy anything they hit. But using them would reveal humanity's true military capabilities to the entire galaxy. "Sir, we're getting more reports from the station," the communications officer said. "The Void Hunters are using some kind of new weapon. Energy shields aren't stopping it." Jake looked at the tactical readout and felt sick. The raiders weren't just attacking the station with conventional weapons. They were using focused gravitational pulses that could collapse entire sections of the structure. Thousands of people were being crushed as the station folded in on itself. The UNS Liberty reached the edge of the Hope's End system, and Jake could see the full scope of the attack. 40 Void Hunter ships surrounded the station like vultures. Their dark hulls were covered in spikes and weapon ports that glowed with malevolent energy. At the center of the formation was a massive vessel that could only be the flagship of Warlord Skrax himself. "This is the UNS Liberty to all Void Hunter vessels," Jake broadcast on all frequencies. "You are attacking a civilian station in violation of all galactic treaties. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences." Warlord Skrax's reply came quickly, and it was filled with mocking laughter. "The soft-flesh humans arrived to save their weak friends. Your tiny ship cannot harm us, human. Watch as we finish destroying your pathetic station." Jake looked around the bridge at his crew. Every face showed the same mix of anger and determination. These were people who had joined the space service to explore the galaxy and make contact with new civilizations. Instead, they found themselves watching innocents die while politicians debated proper procedures. "Claire, target the lead Void Hunter vessel with our magnetic acceleration system," Jake ordered. "Prepare to fire on my command." "Sir, that will reveal our capabilities to everyone," Claire warned. "The Council will know we've been hiding advanced weapons." Jake thought about the families dying on Hope's End Station. He thought about the children who would never grow up and the parents who would never see them again. He thought about his own younger brother, Tony, who was serving as an engineer on that doomed station. "The Council can file their complaints later," Jake said firmly. "Right now, our people need us to act." The tactical display showed the Void Hunter formation closing in for the final assault on Hope's End. Several sections of the station had already been completely destroyed, and debris fields marked where evacuation pods had been targeted and eliminated. Sam Rodriguez's voice had stopped coming through the communication channels 20 minutes ago. "Target acquired," Claire reported. "Magnetic acceleration system charged and ready." Jake took one last look at the beautiful station that was slowly dying in the darkness of space. Somewhere in those burning corridors, his brother Tony was probably trying to save lives even as his own world collapsed around him. The thought filled Jake with cold fury. "All stations, this is Liberty Actual. Jake announced over the ship's internal communication system. "We are engaging the enemy with all available weapons. Today we show the galaxy what humans can do when our families are threatened." The crew responded with grim determination. Every person on the ship understood that they were about to change galactic history forever. The careful diplomatic balance that had kept peace for thousands of years was about to be shattered by humanity's refusal to watch their people die. "Fire," Jake ordered. The UNS Liberty's railgun discharged with a sound like thunder. A tungsten projectile accelerated to nearly 40,000 kilometers per second and crossed the distance to the Void Hunter flagship in less than 3 seconds. The round punched through the enemy ship's energy shields without even slowing down and tore completely through the hull from bow to stern. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then the massive Void Hunter vessel exploded in a brilliant flash of light that could be seen from multiple star systems. The shockwave from the detonation sent the surrounding raider ships tumbling through space like leaves in a hurricane. The galaxy fell silent as every species tried to understand what they had just witnessed. Energy shields were supposed to be impenetrable. Void Hunter ships were supposed to be invincible, but the humans had just destroyed the most powerful raider vessel with a single shot from a weapon that wasn't supposed to exist. Jake stared at the expanding debris field where Warlord Skrax's flagship had been just moments before. The secret was out now. There would be no more hiding humanity's true capabilities from the Galactic Council. The age of diplomatic restraint had ended with the first shot. 3 weeks after the destruction of Hope's End Station, Commander Jake Martinez received the news he had been dreading. His brother Tony Martinez had died trying to save trapped civilians during the Void Hunter attack. The engineer had stayed at his post until the very end, keeping the power systems running so evacuation pods could launch. He saved over 200 lives before a hull breach killed him instantly. Jake stood alone in his quarters aboard the UNS Liberty, holding the official casualty report. The paper felt heavy in his hands, like it contained all the weight of his grief and anger. Around him, the ship hummed with activity, as his crew prepared for what everyone knew would be humanity's most important battle. The Void Hunters were coming to Earth. Intelligence reports showed a massive fleet, gathering in the outer reaches of the Sol system. Warlord Skrax had survived the destruction of his flagship, and now commanded over 60 vessels in what he called his final demonstration of superiority. His target was Archimedes Station, humanity's primary research facility orbiting Jupiter. Dr. Alan Foster was aboard Archimedes working on critical terraforming technology that could transform dead worlds into gardens. The station also housed the families of over 3,000 researchers and support staff. If the Void Hunters destroyed it, they would deal a crushing blow to humanity's expansion into space. Jake walked onto the bridge where Lieutenant Claire Thompson was coordinating with other human ships. The UNS Freedom under Captain Ryan Bell had joined them along with 2 smaller escort vessels. It was a pitifully small force compared to the approaching enemy fleet. "Status report," Jake ordered. "All ships are in position around Jupiter's orbital zone," Claire replied. "Archimedes Station has been evacuated except for essential personnel. Dr. Foster refused to leave his laboratory." Jake nodded grimly. Alan had spent 5 years developing the terraforming systems and would rather die than let them fall into enemy hands. The technology could make any world habitable, but it could also be weaponized to destroy entire ecosystems. "What about council support?" Jake asked. Claire's expression grew dark. "Admiral Kethvar says the Zephyrian fleet cannot reach our position in time to provide assistance. The other species are offering diplomatic solutions and humanitarian aid after the battle." Jake felt his anger flare but kept it controlled. The Galactic Council had spent 3 weeks debating humanity's use of unauthorized kinetic weapons at Hope's End, instead of preparing for the obvious retaliation. Now they were abandoning Earth's defenders to face the enemy alone. "Sir, we're receiving a priority transmission from Admiral Johnson," the communications officer announced. Admiral Betty Johnson's face appeared on the main screen. Behind her, Jake could see the busy command center of Human Space Command on Earth. Her expression was grim but determined. "Commander Martinez, you are authorized to use any and all weapons at your disposal to defend Archimedes Station. The Council has made their position clear. They consider our railguns a violation of galactic law and refuse to provide support. We are on our own." Jake straightened in his command chair. Understood, Admiral. We won't let them take the station. I know you won't, Admiral Johnson replied. Jake, I want you to know that Earth is proud of what you're doing. The politicians can argue about treaties later. Right now you are humanity's shield. The transmission ended and Jake looked around the bridge at his crew. Every face showed the same mix of fear and determination. They were about to face overwhelming odds with weapons the galaxy considered primitive and ineffective. All hands, this is the captain, Jake announced over the ship's communication system. In 1 hour, we will engage a superior enemy force intent on destroying innocent civilians. We fight not for politics or glory, but for the right of peaceful people to live without fear. Today we show the galaxy what it means to be human. The crew responded with quiet professionalism. There were no cheers or dramatic speeches. These people understood the stakes and were prepared to do their duty regardless of the cost. Jake spent the next hour reviewing tactical plans and thinking about his brother Tony. The engineer had died because the galaxy's defenders were too weak and too slow to protect the innocent. Jake would not let that happen again. The Void Hunter fleet appeared at the edge of the system exactly on schedule. 60 ships of various sizes moved in a loose formation toward Jupiter's orbital zone. At their head was Warlord Skrax's new flagship, a massive vessel bristling with weapons and covered in the dark armor that made Void Hunter ships so distinctive. They're broadcasting on all channels, the communications officer reported. Jake accepted the transmission, and Warlord Skrax's scarred face filled the screen. The Raider leader's eyes glowed with malevolent pleasure as he spoke. Humans, your pathetic display at the civilian station was impressive but meaningless. You destroyed one ship with a lucky shot while hiding behind superior numbers. Now you face the full might of the Void Hunter fleet with only 4 vessels. Surrender your research facility and we will grant you quick deaths. Jake stood up slowly and walked closer to the screen. When he spoke, his voice was calm and steady despite the rage burning in his chest. Warlord Skrax, this is Commander Jake Martinez of the United Nations Space Command. You have attacked our civilians, murdered our families, and threatened our homes. I am offering you one chance to withdraw from this system immediately. Skrax laughed, a harsh sound that echoed through the bridge. 4 human ships against 60 Void Hunter vessels. Your bravery is admirable, but your mathematics are terrible. What can you possibly do to stop us? Jake looked at the tactical display showing the approaching enemy fleet. Their ships were larger and more heavily armed than anything humanity had in space. By every conventional measure, the coming battle was hopeless. But the Void Hunters had made the same mistake as every other species in the galaxy. They assumed that bigger ships with more energy weapons automatically meant victory. They had never faced weapons designed to punch through any defense with pure kinetic force. You want to know what we can do? Jake asked quietly. Let me show you. He turned to Claire, who was waiting at the weapons console. Her hands hovered over the controls that would activate their railgun systems. Every person on the bridge held their breath as they waited for the order that would change galactic warfare forever. The Void Hunter fleet spread out into attack formation as they approached Jupiter's orbital zone. Skrax was taking no chances this time. He planned to overwhelm the human defenders with concentrated firepower before they could repeat their lucky shot from hopes. And Jake watched the enemy ships, closed the distance and thought about all the innocent lives depending on him. Dr. Foster and his research team on Archimedes Station. The billions of people on Earth who were counting on their defenders to keep them safe. His brother Tony, who had died because the galaxy's protectors had failed. All weapons target the lead vessel, Jake ordered. Prepare to fire on my command. The UNS Liberty's railgun systems charged with a deep humming sound that vibrated through the ship's hull. Similar sounds came from the other human vessels as they prepared to unleash humanity's most devastating weapons. Warlord Skrax continued his mocking broadcast, unaware that his life was being measured in seconds. Your energy weapons cannot penetrate our shields, humans. Your small ships cannot match our firepower. What makes you think you can succeed where the greatest fleets in galactic history have failed? Jake looked one last time at the image of his brother Tony on his personal display. Then he looked up at the main screen where 60 enemy ships were closing in for the kill. Because we're human, Jake said quietly, and we never give up. He turned to Claire and nodded. Fire. The tungsten projectile left the UNS Liberty's railgun at 12% of light speed and crossed the distance to Warlord Skrax's flagship in 4 seconds. Commander Jake Martinez watched on the main screen as the metal slug punched through the Void Hunter ship's energy shields like they were made of paper. The round tore completely through the massive vessel from bow to stern and continued into space, where it struck two more enemy ships that happened to be in perfect alignment. For a moment, the galaxy held its breath. Then Scrax's flagship exploded in a ball of white-hot plasma that could be seen from Earth. The shockwave from the detonation rippled outward and sent nearby Void Hunter vessels tumbling through space like broken toys. Secondary explosions lit up the darkness as the two ships behind the flagship also came apart in spectacular fireballs. The silence that followed was deafening. Every communication channel across the Sol system went quiet as military commanders and civilian observers tried to process what they had just witnessed. 3 of the most feared warships in known space had been destroyed by a single shot from what everyone believed was a primitive human vessel. Jake stood on the bridge of the Liberty watching the expanding debris fields where the enemy ships had been moments before. Around him, his crew stared at their instruments in stunned disbelief. They had known their railguns were powerful, but seeing them in action against real targets was something else entirely. "Sir, the remaining Void Hunter ships are breaking formation," Lieutenant Claire Thompson reported. Her voice was steady, but Jake could hear the excitement underneath. "They're trying to retreat." Jake looked at the tactical display and saw the enemy fleet scattering in all directions. Without their leader and faced with weapons they couldn't understand, the Void Hunters were abandoning their attack. Ships that had seemed invincible just minutes ago were now fleeing as fast as their engines could carry them. "All human vessels, pursue and engage," Jake ordered. "Don't let any of them escape." The next 30 minutes became a demonstration of everything the galaxy had forgotten about warfare. While energy weapons lost power over distance and could be deflected by shields, the kinetic projectiles from human railguns maintained their devastating force across vast ranges. Void Hunter ships that thought they were safely retreating found themselves being picked off one by invisible rounds moving at impossible speeds. "Captain Ryan," Bell's voice came over the communication system from the UNS Freedom. "Liberty, this is Freedom. We just took out 4 raiders with 3 shots. These weapons are incredible." Jake nodded as he watched another enemy vessel disappear in a brilliant explosion. The Void Hunters had built their reputation on superior technology and overwhelming firepower. Now they were learning that sometimes the oldest solutions were the most effective ones. "Sir, we're receiving surrender signals from multiple Void Hunter vessels," the communications officer announced. Jake considered the request for mercy. These were the same raiders who had shown no compassion when attacking civilian stations. They had murdered his brother and thousands of other innocents without hesitation, but Jake was not like them. "Accept their surrenders," he ordered. "Take them into custody for council justice." When the battle ended 40 minutes after it began, the results sent shockwaves through galactic civilization. Of the 60 Void Hunter ships that had attacked the Sol system, 37 had been destroyed and 23 had surrendered. Not a single human vessel had been lost, and damage to the defending fleet was minimal. The victory was so complete and so one-sided that many species initially refused to believe the reports. Dr. Allen, Foster's voice came through the communication system from Archimedes Station. The elderly scientist sounded shaken but relieved. "Commander Martinez, on behalf of everyone on this station, thank you. We watched the entire battle and we still can't believe what we saw." Jake smiled for the first time in weeks. "Just doing our job, Doctor." "How is the terraforming research?" "Safe and secure," Allen replied. "Though I suspect we'll be getting a lot more funding requests after today's demonstration." Jake understood what he meant. Humanity had just proven that their technology could protect not just themselves, but the entire galaxy from threats that conventional weapons couldn't handle. The political implications were staggering. Over the next several hours, emergency council sessions convened on Nexus Prime, as species representatives tried to understand how humans had achieved the impossible. The Zephyrian Empire, whose military doctrine had dominated galactic warfare for thousands of years, found themselves scrambling to comprehend weapons that made their energy-based defenses obsolete. Admiral Kethvar's first reaction was predictable anger about treaty violations and unauthorized weapons. But as reports continued to arrive about the battle's outcome, his tone began to change. The Zephyrians were warriors at heart, and they respected strength above all else. Ambassador Katie Sullivan found herself at the center of intense diplomatic pressure as alien governments demanded access to human weapon technology. She handled each request with careful professionalism, while making it clear that such decisions would require extensive negotiations. The Crystalline Collective, who had dismissed kinetic weapons as primitive, now sent urgent requests for technical consultations. The thermal dancers wanted to examine the physics of railgun acceleration. Even the Void Singers composed new melodies about the thunder weapons of the young species. Jake received a priority transmission from Admiral Betty Johnson 12 hours after the battle ended. The Admiral's face showed a mixture of pride and concern as she addressed him from Earth. "Commander, congratulations on a flawless victory. The President sends his personal thanks and the entire planet is celebrating. However, we need to discuss the political situation." Jake nodded. He had been expecting this conversation. "What's the Council's official position?" "They're demanding a full investigation into our weapon systems and threatening sanctions for treaty violations," Admiral Johnson replied. "But there's also significant interest in defensive alliances. 3 species have already requested protection agreements." Jake looked out at the debris field that had once been the most feared raider fleet in the galaxy. "And our response?" "We negotiate from a position of strength," Admiral Johnson said firmly. "The galaxy now understands that human technology can protect them from threats their own weapons cannot handle. We'll share our knowledge with species that treat us as equals, not as primitives who need guidance." The conversation continued for another hour as they discussed the new reality of galactic politics. Humanity had entered space as supplicants seeking acceptance from advanced civilizations. Now they were emerging as a major power, whose protection other species actively sought. 6 months later, Jake stood on the observation deck of the newly constructed UNS Thunderbolt, humanity's first purpose-built railgun battleship. The massive vessel represented everything that had changed since that first shot at Jupiter. Instead of hiding their capabilities, humans now openly displayed their kinetic weapons as symbols of their commitment to galactic peace. Claire joined him at the viewport as Earth rotated slowly below them. She had been promoted to captain and would soon take command of her own railgun cruiser. The rapid expansion of human space forces reflected their new role as protectors rather than protected. "Hard to believe how much has changed," Claire observed. Jake nodded as he watched construction crews working on 3 more battleships in nearby orbital shipyards. Alien observers from a dozen species took careful notes as they studied human engineering techniques. The galaxy was learning that innovation often came from refusing to abandon methods that worked. The Void Hunters thought they knew the rules of war, Jake said quietly. They forgot that rules change when someone refuses to play by them. Below them, Earth continued its ancient rotation, while above them the stars waited for humanity's continued expansion. The galaxy had spent thousands of years believing that energy weapons represented the pinnacle of military technology. Now they understood that sometimes the oldest solutions were the most devastating ones. Humanity had joined the Galactic Council as junior members seeking protection and guidance. They were now recognized as the most formidable military force among the stars, not through conquest or aggression, but through the simple refusal to let innocent people die, while politicians debated proper procedures. The age of energy weapon supremacy was over. The era of human kinetic dominance had begun,